everybody. I'm Kimberly Gordon. I'm the Cultural Arts and Adult Department Director here at the PJCC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. People always ask how we find programs, and this one was really a surprise. I got a call from a member who also happens to be my next door neighbor, and he said, I have a high school friend who is a PhD and runs an eating lab, and she's written this really interesting book, Secrets from the Eating Lab, and I know that you're a full wellness facility, and I think it would really interest your clients. So that's Robert here in the front row. So I took this to our wellness committee, because we do have one, and they thought this sounded great. So it was after all of our program guides went to print, but we said if Tracy's going to be here visiting from Minnesota, you were here for a Stanford conference for an alumni event, that we were going to take advantage of that. So I thank you all for coming to our last minute flyer and email push. We're thrilled to have a full room for Tracy today. She's going to tell you more about the work she does at Minnesota as a professor, and also about her really interesting book that says you don't really need to diet. You don't need to follow a diet. You don't need to follow a diet. Because some of you in this room probably have sometime in your life, right? So I'm going to pass it on to Tracy. I'm sure there'll be time in the end for some questions.
Absolutely.
And her book, Secrets from the Eating Lab, is not available today, but it is available on Amazon. So really easy to find on Amazon. And also, we believe she had an author event at BookSync in Mountain View last night, so they have some more signed copies. But there's a pretty good bet our BookSync in Burlingame has the title too, so you can check with them as well. I encourage you all to pick up a copy after you've, if you want to know more about what you've heard today. And thank you again. Well, help me welcome Traci MANN.
Oh my gosh, thank you all for coming. I'm really delighted. Gosh, the people who just come out. It's still 10 a.m. It's really sweet. It's nice to be among my people too. So thank you for that. I do research on dieting, and this is a topic that everybody knows all about, right? There's certain things about dieting that everybody knows, right? So first of all, everybody knows you can get thin and stay thin by dieting. Everyone knows this. Everyone also knows that if you can't, it's your own fault, right? It's because you're weak, right? Everyone also knows that if you don't carefully watch every calorie you eat, you're going to get fat. And if you're thin, it's because you are watching every calorie you eat. People also know that fat people eat more than thin people, and that you have to be thin to be healthy, and that being fat will kill you eventually. And finally, people also know that if you feel bad, eating comfort food will make you feel better. Everybody knows all of these things, but none of those things are true. Not one of those things is true. Most things you hear about dieting are not scientifically accurate, and to be fair, most of it isn't trying to be scientifically accurate. It's trying to sell you something, right? It doesn't care if it's true. That's not its concern. It doesn't care if it's accurate. I am a scientist, and I do care about accuracy, and I do care about what's true. And what I tried to do in writing this book that you see here is to give the state of the science on dieting. And it's based on partly 20 years of research in my own eating lab, which actually started right here at Stanford during grad school, partly on research in other labs, and partly on what I think was a very careful, critical review of the other research that's out there. So one of the things that is good about science, in my opinion, but maybe others don't agree, but one thing about science is you don't get to choose what's true. And because of that, some of the research I'm going to talk about, some of the findings, might be what you considered bad news. Okay, and I didn't want to pander to readers of the book or to you guys. So the first 3 words of chapter 1 are diets don't work. Just flat out, diets don't work. And I say that because diets don't work. And that's why I feel comfortable starting the book with that, with those 3 words that really upset people. People don't like those words. But here's why I say it. I say they don't work because they don't do what we want them to do. And what we want them to do is help us lose a lot of weight that stays off a long time. Okay? And that's what diets don't do. So about 8 years ago or so, my grad students and I, we hunted down in the scientific literature every single study that tested a diet using sort of the gold standard way of testing things, and then followed people up in the long term to see what happens. There's almost, I want to say, 1,000 studies of diets out there. Pretty much all of them stop after 6 months. And if people have lost weight and at 6 months they still have that weight off, they call the diet a success, they write their paper, they open their diet clinic, they try to get people to come, maybe they write a book, maybe they, you know, share their finding with the CEO of a company who promotes that as why their diet will work. Those studies are kind of pointless. Okay, when you look at those studies, it's clear. Any diet that you try, in about a year, you'll lose about 10% of your weight. You start weighing 200 pounds, in about a year you'll lose 20. You find this pretty much no matter what diet you look at. So you find this with Weight Watchers, you find this with the cabbage soup diet, you find this with something my mom used to do called the ice cream diet. It doesn't really matter, as crazy as it sounds, whatever it is, they all tend to work and work about the same as each other. There's not huge differences. But it doesn't matter, because by looking just at these long-term studies, we found that within about 3 years, dieters have regained, on average, so don't be alarmed, but on average, they've regained all but 2 of the pounds they've taken off. Okay, so sort of as an aside, I should say, data and research on human behavior, so I'm a psychologist, so we study human behavior, and data on humans is notoriously messy. It is rarely clear, it's rarely straightforward. It's hard to tell what's going on. It's what the word my advisor used for it when I first came out to Stanford was noisy. Human behavior is noisy. It's highly variable. People are so different from each other in every single way. It makes it really hard to detect what's true and what's the same. You have to sort of hear it through all that noise. And that's what I find, whatever I do research on, I find that to be the case, except these long-term studies of diets. Not noisy, not fuzzy, not hard to hear what those data are saying, could not be more clear. Okay? Anybody who says otherwise, anyone comes and says diets do work in the long run, they either haven't seen the research and so should not be saying anything, or they're lying. There's no other possibilities there. Okay? This is how clear that research is. Diet companies are aware of this research. Diet companies actually collect their own data on the effectiveness of their diets. A lot of them have a thing where you have to go to them each week and do a weekly weigh-in. Many of you maybe tried a kind of diet where you have to show up and get weighed every week and they record it. Those companies refuse to share that data with anybody, which tells me, and I don't mean to be cynical about this, but what that tells me is those numbers show that their diets don't work. Because if they showed that their diets worked, we'd all be hearing about it. It would be in their ads because they would be the only diet that could say that because none of them work. So I feel pretty confident in saying that diet companies know that their diets don't work. And they've actually fought tooth and nail against the government to not have to tell you how ineffective their products are. But if you think about it, they have to be ineffective. Of course they're ineffective, or they would soon go out of business. Right? This is an unusual industry that sort of thrives on its product not working. Okay, so the former CFO of Weight Watchers actually came out in an interview on the BBC and said their business comes from repeat customers. Okay, people who do it, lose weight, regain it, and then sign up all over again. They're going to put up the money all over again. They say on their business plan, they say this flat out on their business plan, that their average customer signs up 4 separate times for Weight Watchers. Okay? If not, they couldn't survive. He also said in this interview that joining Weight Watchers was like playing the lottery. Okay, I don't think that's what they put in their ads. I don't think that's what they tell you when you're knocking on their door. Okay, so that part is clear. Okay. There's just no denying that part of it. Okay, they don't work and we know it. So the real question is why? Why don't diets work? And the answer, of course, that everybody knows is because of willpower. People don't have enough willpower. Okay, and that actually is also false. It has much more to do with biology than with willpower. So to kind of explain that, we first have to appreciate that we all have a genetically based set weight range. People sometimes call this a set point or a set weight. It's really a range. But we have this genetically based set of weights that our bodies try to defend. That our body works to keep us in this range. If you want to maintain a weight that's below that range, or above it, but especially below it, it's going to be a lifelong battle against biology, against psychology, and against evolution. And these are not things you want to be battling. You can, fight those things for a while, but not forever. So what do I mean by battle with evolution? So we've evolved, us human people, we've evolved through periods of famine, right? And the people who survived to pass on their genes to us were the ones who had certain biological responses to those times of famine. Okay, so those same biological responses still happen now. Again, those are the people who survived and passed on their genes. So those things still happen now when not enough food comes in, such as when we're dieting and living below our set weight range. If we're in that kind of deprivation, these different biological changes happen. So some of these are neurological changes, and there's brain imaging studies that show this. Basically, when you're deprived, when you're hungry, you're not eating enough, not enough's coming in, you become preoccupied with thoughts of food. Okay, they've shown this in a whole bunch of different ways, including with people in those famous semi-starvation studies that they did during World War II. People are hungry, they become completely preoccupied with thoughts of food. Really hard to get food out of your mind. You're more likely to notice food if it's present. Once you notice it, it gets stuck and you can't take your mind off it. You're much more likely to focus hard on it. Now, if you think about it, those features would be incredibly useful and help you survive if you were in a time of scarcity. Because what's that going to do? It's going to lead you to search non-stop for food and think about nothing but food until you find some. Okay, those are the people who survived, right? The people who hunted and searched for food and never thought about anything else. Okay, so that's great, again, useful if you're starving to death on the savannah, but not really helpful at all if you're trying to stay on a diet. It's sort of the opposite of what you want to happen. You don't want to be totally focused on thoughts of food all the time. It just makes it harder to stay on it. So you have that working against you if you're trying to keep weight off. There's also hormonal changes. And these changes, so certain hormones help you feel full, others leave you feeling hungry, and the levels of these hormones change when you're in this biological deprivation mode or starvation mode. And the change is such that it makes it harder for you to feel full. Okay, it basically leaves you feeling hungry with amounts of food that would normally make you feel full. Okay, so suddenly you're eating the same thing, it's not filling you up anymore. It used to, but now it's not. And again, you can see how that could keep people alive in times of scarcity, because it makes you eat more food when food is present. Okay, but again, if you're trying to stay on a diet, this is not what you want to have happen. Unfortunately, it is what happens. And then finally, there's metabolic changes, which I think people generally have a sense of. Those seem to be sort of well known out there in the world. And these changes basically help keep you alive with less food than normal. So, calories are energy, and that energy is used to run your body, to run all the different systems in your body. When not enough food is coming in, your metabolism changes, it gets more efficient, okay, which means you can run your body on fewer calories than it used to take. And that leaves more calories unused to store as fat. So handy if you're in a famine, right, and there won't be more food anytime soon. It's good that the food you ate will keep you alive longer. But if you're trying to lose weight, this is really not what you want to have happening, right? Instead of burning those calories to run your body, you're storing them. And that's just, I really think those metabolic changes are particularly cruel if you think about it, because that means that eating the same amount of calories you ate while you were losing weight stops leading to weight loss. It just doesn't work anymore. I mean, if you think about it psychologically, that's a nightmare. It's devastating. How do you stay motivated when the thing that was working, which was hard, is not working anymore? Okay, so another reason why this is particularly cruel. Just another way to think about it, think about a person who, you know, starts at 200 pounds, loses weight to 150. The amount of calories they need to run their body is less than someone who was always 150 pounds, who didn't get there by losing weight. Okay, so you get there by losing weight, and then you need fewer calories to stay there. So the reason this infuriates me so much is because if this dieter then regains weight at this point, people will say they had no self-control, or people will say they were a glutton, they overate, even though they could actually be eating less than someone else who's that same weight, just who didn't get there through deprivation. Okay, so I just find it incredibly cruel to expect certain people in our society to have to live that way, to have to live in this deprivation mode, just because they happen to have a body size, a set weight, set range, that's heavier than we've decided is acceptable. And I think that's practically immoral to expect people to live that way. Basically, you're asking people to live, you guys, society is asking people to live as if they're in a famine, right? You're putting your body into starvation mode when, in fact, you're not in a famine. All right, so that's the why. So overall, sum that part up, it's incredibly difficult to overcome these biological changes that happen when you try to live below your set weight range. Okay, so I thought this was a message that people should hear. Okay, I just got really, really sick of people blaming dieters when they regain weight that they lost. So about 11 years ago, I wrote a book proposal about why diets don't work. And no publisher would even consider publishing that. And the reason they gave, and I believe that this is why, the reason they gave was they said it was all just too much bad news. Just bad news. No one wants to read bad news. No one will buy it, so we won't publish it. And this really bugged me for many reasons. I mean, first of all, I don't think it's bad news. Okay, I don't think it's bad news to learn that it's not your fault if you regain weight you lost. So that's part one. Part two, I think people want to know what's true. I think people deserve to know what's true, and I think people want to know what's true. So if true happens to be something that you consider bad news, I still think people want to know that. But the third reason this really completely bugged me is right then when they were telling me that this was bad news and so they didn't want to publish it, the #1 bestseller at that moment was, I think, the ultimate in bad news. Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to what was the really big bad news bestseller at that time?
The South Sea Diet.
The diet book. Not that. I would agree, that's bad news.
Diets Don't Work, or is that the name of the book?
I don't know if there's a book with that name. It's not a book about dieting. This bad news book that was topping the bestsellers.
The Secret?
Ooh, that would be good. It's not that. My husband's guess, which I wish was true, isn't true. His guess was Tuesdays with Maury, which seems like bad news. But actually, the top of the bestseller list at the time, this was just killing me, was a book called He's Just Not That Into You. Anyone? Right?
Yeah.
It's a million reasons why this guy you want is not interested. I mean, that's like the worst bad news ever. So, very annoying. Also very disappointing. And I didn't actually dare even think about trying again to get a book deal for another 10 years. Lots of stuff happened during that time, including I was studying self-control, and my mom kept asking me what I was discovering that would help her lose weight. And for the longest time, the answer was always nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was learning things. I was learning things that were interesting to me and like 6 other social psychologists in the world, but none of it useful to my mom. Same time as all that happening, whenever I told people I studied the self-control of eating, they always responded in the same way. Always. 100% of the time. It's rare when things happen 100% of the time with humans, because humans are so different from each other. But every time I told people that was what I was studying, they said, oh man, I need that. That is what I need. You know, tell me when you figure that out, because I need it. And everybody said it like, you know, they were so unusual. And again, this was everybody. This actually finally hit me that every single person was going to say this all the time when we had a very esteemed visitor come to our department, our psych department at the University of Minnesota. And this visitor was so esteemed that the department actually choreographed this visit. I think the way probably a papal visit might be choreographed. We had a rehearsal, a timed rehearsal, seriously. And I was lucky enough to be one of the people who got to show him my lab. And I had precisely 2 minutes to get him from the previous lab, walk him to my lab, and show him around. And I had 3 students waiting in the lab to each say a little tiny 30-second thing about what we were doing. 20 seconds each, I can't quite remember. Nevertheless, the moment I picked him up and I mentioned what I do, because that was the point, to tell him what was going on in the lab, the moment I mentioned controlling eating, he launched into his own, oh my God, controlling eating, if only I could do that. Wow, you have really touched on my personal problem. So everybody says this as if they're unusual or alone in their inability to reliably resist food. They don't think they're the only one, but they think they're in some unusual minority of people who struggle with that and everyone else can do it. That's not the case. This is pretty much everybody. It's not everybody, but it's pretty much everybody. Where are the people who think they have great self-control? Do these people even exist? They've never identified themselves to me. That's never happened. No one's ever come up and said, oh, wow, you should study me. I have great self-control. This has never happened. I'm sure these people exist, and there might even be some in the room right now, and I would suggest that if you are in the room, to not identify yourself. Because none of us want to know, right? I mean, we don't want to know. So anyway, it exists, I know, but it's rare. Okay, but here's the thing. If you've struggled to take weight off or keep it off, it's not because you have a weaker will than everyone else. Willpower actually plays a much smaller role in people's weight than really anyone realizes. So here's a handy way to remember just how unimportant self-control is when it comes to weight loss. So I told you how diets don't work, and on average people gain back all but 2 of the pounds. So that's an average, which means some people keep some off. Some people even keep a lot off. And there's a number that people give is they say 5% of people manage to keep off the weight they lost in the long run. I don't know where that number comes from. So I'm slightly dubious about that number, but it's the number everyone uses. Anyway, somebody who's in that small minority, and I do believe it's a small minority, who has taken off a lot of weight and kept it off a very long time, a person who did that, you would think that would be a person with amazing self-control, right? In fact, one of these most successful dieters, Bill Clinton. Okay, this is not someone who most people think of as having great self-control, right? This is not, I love him, I fully do love him, I voted for him, but he's not someone known for self-control, and yet he's a very successful dieter. So it doesn't actually matter, and here's why. Here's why it doesn't matter. So you have to imagine this scenario. You're in a meeting, you're like at a conference table. I'm never in meetings that are like this, but conference room, table, someone comes in, plops a box of donuts on the table. This is a fairly typical thing, I believe. You're trying not to have a donut, right? You want to resist that. You're trying, you're trying to diet. So they plop it on the table and you show some impressive self-control and you don't take one. You resist one. That's great. It's a very impressive bit of self-control you've shown. You're not done, though. You're still there. The donut's still there. This is not a one-instant act, right? Resisting that donut in this situation actually is going to require multiple acts of self-control, not just one. If it was just one, we could all do it, right? But the problem is you have to resist it now, and 2 minutes from now, and 2 minutes after that, and 2 minutes after that. Basically, every time you look up and notice it, right, you have to resist it all over again. Now, given those neurological changes I just told you about, when you're deprived, you're going to notice it a lot, and you're going to think about it a lot, and you're going to lock onto it. There's even evidence that people have trouble focusing on the meeting when there's a box of donuts on the table than if there's not a box of donuts on the table. That's how powerful it is. these neurological effects when you're starving or hungry. Okay, so donuts are there. Suppose you resist them the first 19 times that you notice them. And that could happen 19 times. It's a meeting, you're there an hour, once every 3 minutes you might look up and, yeah, I mean, everyone sort of thinks that's such a big number, but that's about right. So, you know, you have great self-control. You resist it the first 19 times you look up, but then you get distracted, you have a 2-second moment of weakness, and on the 20th time you look up, you take the donut and you eat it. You've shown unbelievably impressive self-control, 19 times out of 20. That's an A+, right? That's 95%. That's an A+ in everything, except this. You get nothing for this. You may as well have resisted it 0 times, right? You don't get credit for this impressive self-control you've shown. You have nothing to show for it. So momentary lapses of self-control erase all the successes that came before. Okay, so eating is particularly and uniquely unforgiving of lapses in self-control. And we can talk later about things that are much less unforgiving, if we want. A little digression, we can go there later. And so eating is really unforgiving of these lapses, and these lapses in self-control are particularly likely with eating. They're really hard to avoid because, as you all know, we live in this culture where there's constantly food around. There's constantly temptations that we are supposed to resist. So if willpower were going to help us, it would have to be incredibly strong. It would have to be nearly flawless, if not flawless, to handle that. I mean, right, 95% willpower is not good enough. Okay, so willpower is not remotely strong. Willpower is the opposite. It's incredibly fragile. It's really easy to disrupt somebody's willpower. There's decades of research showing how easy it is to disrupt people's willpower. In addition to that, despite what you see on the cover of women's magazines, not men's, only women's, excuse me, there's no evidence at all that people can grow their willpower, or what they call harness. They say harness their willpower. There's no evidence that that's a thing that people could do. That some people will try to say there is not. Okay, so one of the secrets in this book is that we cannot and should not rely on willpower for weight loss. Okay, willpower, not our friend, right? Instead, we need to make sure that we just never need it. So one of the things in there is 12 strategies for healthy eating that don't require willpower or dieting. And I call these smart regulation strategies because it's based on a saying that a Dutch collaborator of mine told me, which is, if you can't be strong, you have to be smart. If you think of strength as willpower, instead of foolishly depending on that, you're going to need to outsmart it. Okay, and so the goal of these strategies is to help you reach what I refer to as your leanest livable weight. Okay, so this is the weight at the lower end of your set weight range. Okay, so it's the lowest weight you can be without setting off all that starvation stuff, without setting off your body into thinking you're in a famine, and then causing it to make all those changes, which make it really, really hard to resist eating. Okay, so the low end of your set weight range. Now this weight is probably not as low as your usual weight loss goal. Okay, it's going to be here, not here. Okay, but I really want people to think about living here, not here. Okay, it's a weight that you can live at easily. You can be healthy at this weight. It's perfectly healthy to be at that weight, and you can still enjoy your life. You don't have to engage in this giant battle against biology and evolution every single minute. So another way to think about this is we just need something between these two poles, and you hear about both of these. One end is this restrictive dieting, this constant battling, this unbearable, constant focus on restricting your eating, and this extreme of just letting it all go and eating everything and not caring at all. Okay, this is something that I think we need a middle ground here, and so what I'm talking about is the sensible middle. So I thought I would tell you 2, maybe 3 of the strategies, and then we can do some questions. So, strategies, okay. Smart regulation strategies. So some of the strategies, this is sort of a category, I guess, of strategies. There are ways to put obstacles between yourself and tempting food. And these kinds of strategies work really well with people because most of us humans are pretty lazy. I mean, self included, we're pretty lazy. So obstacles slow us down, even stop us sometimes. So there's a study, this Dutch collaborator I mentioned, she did a study where she showed, you know, if you have a bowl of M&Ms, if it's 5 feet across the room, you'll eat half as many as if it's right here on the table next to you. Okay, that is actually a big obstacle. You have to stop what you're doing, you have to get up out of your chair, you have to walk across the room, and that's an interruption, that's a big obstacle. If only big obstacles stopped or slowed people, this would not be a useful strategy. But in fact, they also showed in the same study that if they put that bowl of M&Ms on the same table where you're sitting, but instead of right here by your hand, I tried to explain this on the radio, it didn't work at all. They put it, instead of here at your hand, if they put it just so that you have to extend your arm 2 feet, lean a little, you eat just as few as if it were 5 feet across the room. Okay, this is a tiny obstacle, having to extend your arm. I mean, come on, I cannot really think of a much smaller obstacle than that, and yet it stops you or slows you. Okay, so does it keep you from eating any of the candy in this bowl? No. You're still going to eat some, but it helps you to eat less. Okay, and eating less, but not necessarily none, seems like a reasonable goal. Okay, because you want to enjoy your life. This is it. You know, you get one of these, so you want to enjoy it, and in addition to that, restricting yourself from eating foods can just flat out backfire. And I think people have experienced this. Anecdotally, people have experienced it, but we did a study of this years and years ago. We told our subjects in the study that they were forbidden from eating a particular food for 3 weeks. And we had them record their thoughts and desires and such every night. And we found that being forbidden from eating a food made them think about it more and want it more. But here's the thing. We didn't tell them to forbid themselves from eating something they liked a lot. We had them forbid themselves from eating food that they felt neutral about. We said, rate how much you like and enjoy this food, and whatever was the middle of the scale, we had them pick. So the most commonly chosen food in that study was rice. So we had people, you know, forbidden from eating a neutral food, and it made them think about it all the time and want it all the time. A food they didn't care about. So imagine if it's a food you love. Okay, this will backfire. So you don't want to be forbidding. So that's why the goal is just to eat less, not none. Okay, so that's one sort of category of strategies. Another category of strategies basically flips that around. It's sort of the opposite of that, to help you eat more healthy food by removing obstacles that come between you and those foods. So a lot of healthy foods have a lot of obstacles between us and them. Vegetables, I've done a lot of research trying to get kids to eat vegetables. Vegetables have so many obstacles, right? They're bitter, some of them. A lot of them, I mean, carrots just take so long to chew. It's like, God, I'm still chewing that same bite. A lot of them require work to be put into the format for eating, right? You've got to scrape them, you need to chop them, to clean them, whatever. It's a lot of obstacles between you and vegetables. The more of those you can remove, the better. But the first strategy in this category is what I call get alone with a vegetable. And it's super easy. It's just this: eat a vegetable before you put any other food on your plate or even have any other food in sight. Okay, you eat the vegetable and nothing else is around. And the reason this works is if you think about a meal, a plate full of food, those foods are in competition with each other, right? It's like, which one are you going to eat first? Which one's going to be left over at the end of the meal? This is a contest. And for most of us, not all of us, but again, don't identify yourself. For most of us, vegetables tend to lose to most other foods, right? So the point of this strategy is to put vegetables into a contest that they can win, which might, for many people, be the only contest they can win, which is vegetable versus nothing. Okay, vegetable versus staying hungry. And if you do that, you know, if all you have is a vegetable and you're hungry, you will eat it. Put it on a plate next to the spaghetti and all bets are off, right? So I actually came up with this strategy by watching something my kids did when they were really small. They were 3 and 6 years old, and we were eating in a deli in Los Angeles where they normally put a nice bowl of pickles on the table. As juniors, I think I heard that it's gone, which is tragic. But normally they put this bowl, it's so sad, they normally put this bowl of pickles on the table. But this day I'm thinking they were out of pickles and didn't want to leave us with nothing while we waited for our food, because, I mean, what would happen? We could revolt, I don't know what would happen. So instead of bringing a bowl of pickles, they brought a bowl of sauerkraut. Big bowl of sauerkraut. And my kids, again, age 3 and 6, I know food is very culturally specific, and I don't in any way want to offend. Sauerkraut, tough sell for a kid. It has a powerful smell. It doesn't look so good. Do you like sauerkraut? You're a kid. No, because it's disgusting. I mean, right? It's gross. Yeah. So sorry again. Don't mean to offend. I'm Jewish. My relatives ate sauerkraut. Still do. My kids, age 3 and 6, gobbled up the entire bowl of sauerkraut between them with their fingers, which was appalling, frankly. It's just really inappropriate. But there weren't forks, and that is a lot of sauerkraut for kids. It shocked me, absolutely shocked me. And I spent years going, what made them do that? And, you know, ultimately I came to the technical scientific conclusion that they did that because it was there. That is my fancy science thinking there. It was there and nothing else was there. They're hungry and it's there, so they eat it. Now, don't trust me on this just because of this anecdote about my kids. Maybe they're freaks, you know. Who knows if other people would act the way they did. We've tested this strategy in a bunch of different ways. In particular, with a bunch of colleagues at the University of Minnesota, we've tested this in elementary school cafeterias. We just gave each student a little cup of baby carrots, and frankly, tough sell as well. Those are gross, baby carrots. They look like little pops of poop with the wrong color, but those look disgusting. And they're slimy when you touch them. That's not what that's the worst. Give kids nice carrots. In any case, we gave them these little baby carrots in a cup, and we gave it to them before they got in line to go into the cafeteria and get their food. Okay, so they're eating this, there's no food anywhere. And normally in this school, based on our pre-test days, 10% of the kids in that school ate the vegetable from the lunch on a given day. 10%. That is sad. And the government gives schools money for vegetables. So schools do offer kids vegetables, and they have enough for everyone. But of course, the problem is getting kids to take them and then to eat them. What we found is when we gave them veggies first, 5 times as many kids ate vegetables those days. Okay, and they ate a good amount of them. So it was very successful with kids, and we did it multiple times with different vegetables and different cafeteria setups, and it always worked beautifully. So veggies first. Now we also tested this with the college freshmen in my seminar. I had them for 3 weeks record everything they ate, and so the first week they just did that, and then the second 2 weeks I said, now start your meal with a vegetable. Okay, just get a vegetable. They're eating in the college cafeteria, so put only the vegetable on your tray, eat it, and then go get the rest of your meal. Sure enough, they ate way more vegetables those weeks, but not only that, they ate fewer calories overall, even though they weren't trying to reduce calories, and they were surprised when they used a bit of software to record what they ate, and when I reported back to them that, showed them their calories going down, they were surprised. They hadn't expected that or tried for that, and it just happened, because eating more vegetables tends to mean eating less of something else, because a lot of those vegetables are filling. Not all of them, but lots of them are. All right, so that was another strategy. Should I do one more?
Sure.
You want one more strategy? Okay, totally different kind of thing, but it's fun to tell you about this one because I can describe a goofy study we did. We like to do goofy studies. Okay, so this is a strategy that has you make a point of eating with friends who have sensible eating habits, because those tend to rub off on you. So we did these crazy studies where we brought groups of 3 friends into our lab and basically sneakily watched whether they ate the fresh, warm, home-baked cookies we made for them. And many lies were told. That's the nature of this kind of research. Before we sneakily watched them eating these things, we had secretly gotten 2 of the friends to be in cahoots with us, basically. And we told them, without the third seeing or knowing, we told them under no circumstances should you eat these cookies. Okay, do not eat these cookies. And we put them together and we watched what the third girl did when her 2 friends did not eat the cookies. And what we found, first of all, is kind of the obvious thing, right? Is that if her friends didn't eat the cookies, then she didn't either. This isn't a big surprise. You know, people do what their friends do. The part that's more surprising and more important is that later on, we put her alone in a room, brought in new cookies so they're warm again, they smell good. She still didn't eat them. Okay, her friends aren't present. They'll never know if she ate them or not. She still didn't eat them. It somehow rubbed off on her. So if you try to eat around people who have healthy habits, it's going to affect you in sort of a normative pressure kind of way, I think. Okay, so overall, just to sort of wrap up, and then we'll totally answer questions. The key to all these strategies and all the other ones is that they work no matter how little willpower you have. Okay, and what I recommend is put them in place in your daily life. They're all very simple to put in place, and then just get on with it. Okay, you can make these simple changes. You will improve your health. You will feel better about yourself, and you can stop worrying about your weight all the time. Okay, so I really hope that despite starting with these 3 bad words, I really hope you feel liberated, not discouraged by this information. As I quote from an author who I don't know, named Glennon Melton, at the end of the book, your body is not what is supposed to be your masterpiece, but your life is a masterpiece. Okay, so even though, again, I start with those 3 words everyone hates to hear, diets don't work, I want you to know that the last 3 words in the book are much better. They're maybe the best words ever. Okay, the book ends with these words, cup or cone.
I didn't hear that.
Cup or cone. So let me end with that. Thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to answer questions on anything even loosely related to this. Starting with yours.
Is there such a thing as resetting your body weight? So, for example, as we age, sometimes we might gain a couple of pounds every year. Over 15 years, that's 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Does your body start resetting the weight that it's supposed to be, preset?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One of those things is menopause. Okay, so that changes it. It doesn't just change it, but it rearranges things, which is, I don't even know how it does that. But aside from that, there's something there's something that I call set point creep, where it can slowly creep up. What it's not going to do is jump up, but it can creep up somewhat. And, you know, I feel like if you do sort of these sensible small changes, that should keep that from happening, because that's a slow creep, and so you kind of keep bumping back to the middle or to the lower end and try to keep it from creeping. But there is some evidence that it will creep up, and there's no evidence that you can lower it. Even though there's diets with the name lower your set point diet, that's a lie. There's zero studies showing you can lower your set point. Oh, I'm sorry, I know people think that's bad news. Yes?
I have 2 questions. The first is I'm wondering what your thoughts are on GMOs, corn, frankenwheat, all that. I understand what you're saying about everything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that? And the second question is, are you familiar with the Institute for the Psychology of Eating and Mark David? His work is similar to what you're talking about.
Mark David?
Yes.
I didn't know that name. Fabulous, David. Where is he?
He's in Boulder, Colorado. And he has a couple of books and he trains coaches as well.
He trains doing a complete series this week online.
On one of his
I've never
coaches.
heard of
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
listening to it now. It's
Very
amazing.
Now, I usually get the Brian Wansink question and he and I, yes, we know each other and have many overlapping ideas. GMO, I'm just going back to, and if you want to ask about sugar, you're going to get the same answer from me, which is, I don't believe that foods are poison, and I'm fine with moderation. And beyond that, I don't know very much about the ins and outs of nutrition and vitamins and such. So, yes, I can't say anything more about that. Yes?
Another question from me.
Oh, sorry, you already had a question.
Yeah,
It's okay.
is there somebody else? Go
I'm
ahead.
going to answer all of them, so it doesn't matter what order we do.
Is there a way to increase your metabolism?
So with exercise, presumably your metabolism is supposed to, do better things. It's awkward talking about metabolism. It's supposed to slow down. But I feel like there's research where they try to have people lose weight and then start some hardcore exercise at the bottom of the weight loss curve to see if that will keep the deprivation stuff from happening, and it hasn't really been very effective. So I guess I would have to just say, not really. It's not good. I haven't seen it anyway, if that's possible.
If you build up muscle, isn't muscle supposed to burn more calories?
Yes, muscle does
Weight
burn more
training and all
calories.
that?
Yep, weight training is a really good thing to do for many reasons, including that one. But also really good for women, weight-bearing exercise, good for your bones and all this. Yes, so we should definitely be doing that. Is it going to make you skinny? No. But it will firm you up, it'll help you look nicer, but it's not, it's not going to lead to giant. Let me say something about exercise while we're here, because I feel like this is about to come up. For years I thought I was doing exercise wrong because I was not becoming skinny from it. I was not looking like a marathon runner. It turns out that exercise does help people lose weight, but not nearly as much as we've been promised. Not nearly as much as they make it look like it's going to when you look at ads for, Lifetime Fitness or whatever. People think that exercise improves your health by leading to weight loss, by making you thinner. But in fact, exercise improves your health whether or not you lose weight from doing it. Exercise doesn't make you healthier because you lose weight. Exercise makes you healthier because it's exercise, okay, whether you lose weight or not. So I push exercise pretty hard in the book. It's really important to do for those health benefits, and it will benefit you no matter what you weigh, okay, which is why you can be healthy at any weight. Makes sense. Right, sorry, more.
Any thoughts on Food Addicts Anonymous or Overeaters Anonymous, which is based on the premise that there is an addiction to sugar for some people, sugar and gluten or wheat?
I tend to fight against the addiction model when it comes to food, when it comes to particular foods. With that said, I know that there's some evidence with sugar that if you stop eating sugar, it really follows patterns of coming off addictive drugs. Nevertheless, and I know this is going to come back and kick me in the butt someday, nevertheless, I still stand by sugar's fine in moderation, because I really feel like enjoyment is important, and enjoying your life is important, and if you can eat sugar in moderation, there's no reason why not. The only reason not to is because you can't, because you might keep eating more and more. And I'll also add that I love sugar. I eat a ton of sugar, and I feel like anything I say on this topic is suspect by my personal bias. And honestly, doing research on dieting all these years, I didn't really care one way or the other which way the data came out. I was able to be unbiased in reviewing that work because I didn't have a stake in it in any which way. I didn't need to diet myself. I don't have a diet clinic. I don't, I'm not a CEO of a diet company. I have no stake in it whatsoever, so I feel like I was really able to be unbiased on that and the stuff in the book. When it comes to sugar, I feel like I'm actively not reading the literature because I don't want to know, I don't want to feel like I have to stop eating sugar. So I'm sticking with moderation when it comes to sugar. That's okay. Oh, sorry, your hand was next.
Considering the epidemic of childhood obesity, where kids are fat with set points from bad food choices that they or their parents make, certainly they deserve to lose that weight for their own health. What do you have to say about set points that are artificially high because of poor choices that affect their health later?
Yeah, there's no such thing as set point when it comes to kids. They're still growing, no one can figure anything out, there's nothing stable. But separate from that, obviously kids are becoming obese more, and it's because of their behavior. It's because of eating, it's because of being sedentary. I like to push the physical activity side of it much harder for kids than the diet part, because dieting for kids, I feel like, can really mess them up. I think it can really backfire. They get into this cycle of losing and gaining, which is not healthy for them. And if they exercise, and if they can really make that a habit, that will do the job. That will make them healthy. That will, and hopefully it will also lead to some reasonable weight loss. But I think it's tough putting a young person on a strict diet. I don't think it's going to end very well. But getting them to exercise, I think, will. So that's my kid remark. With that said, the book is not about children, and I don't generally follow the kid research, except, on the promoting vegetable eating part. So take that with a grain of salt, as needed. Yes?
Traci, I was going to ask, does your book cover how you define a diet? I mean, a series of guidelines that at some point it's a diet. What's the range?
Sure. What I mean is restricting calories. And if you look at all the diets out there, they're not usually described that way. There's some that are. Weight Watchers is about restricting calories. But there's lots of diets that are about restricting other things. There's all these, restricting carbs or restricting fats or this or that. Paleo, all of these describe themselves as working through other mechanisms. But in fact, they all work because they lead you to eat fewer calories. And that is how all diets work, by leading you to eat fewer calories. Whatever they say in the front of their books, or whatever the company says for how their product works. So when I talk about dieting, I do mean restricting calories. And obviously I can't give a number because everybody weighs more and needs different amount, and weighs different things and needs different things. But I feel like, and I think I've gone off the rails in terms of your question, a lot of things now know that diets don't work, or know that they should say that diets don't work, and so they say they're not a diet, when really they're a diet. Okay, so whatever you call it, if the goal is to live on 1,200 calories a day or something, it's a diet, right? If it's disguised under reducing carbs, still a diet. So I'm kind of lumping everything in there, if it's in that strictness. So I've had some people look at my book and say that what I'm suggesting is a diet. It is not, because you're not restricting your calories, and the goal is not to lose a lot of weight. The goal is just to be sort of the best version of yourself, be the better end of your normal range. So I think I'm not suggesting a diet. Well, only one person said that, but they said it really loudly on Amazon. Really kind of bugged me.
Well, thank you. So I think people are actually on their way to an exercise
Oh,
class
right.
that starts at 11.
Oh, do that.
But,
But I'm happy to answer more questions if there are any. Yeah.
How do you determine your range? Like, is your weight today within that set point range.
Yeah, tough one. Another one that science just hasn't quite gotten there yet, so I can't say, you know, here's what your range is, here's what your set range is. And so the only way we can figure this out is sort of backwards. So we say, what do you weigh when you're exercising a reasonable amount, not a ton, but not none, and you're eating, but you're not binging, but you're not dieting. Where does your weight settle when you do those things? And, we would define that as probably around the middle of your set range, and then you can use some strategies to go, you know, another 5 to 10 pounds lower than that.
Does your set point change as you get older? I have found with myself.
Yeah, so menopause definitely.
No, but I mean like 60, 70, 80. Does your set point naturally change or should it?
No, I don't think there's any. So menopause, we know it does.
Yeah.
Does it continue to change? Okay, but I don't. Not that I know of. Not that I know of. It shouldn't keep creeping up.
Does your appetite change?
These are good questions. So what the literature is missing, and by that I don't mean there's none, but there's much less. What the literature is really low on is the full lifespan, the full life cycle. It tends to focus on people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. A smattering of people older than that in studies, and they don't look at that specifically. So appetite across the lifespan.
Yeah, I've anecdotal evidence
curious.
with my parents that they both always loved eating. They always loved eating and always ate huge amounts of food, always on diets. But as they got older, their appetite declined. I mean, really, like in their 80s, my dad, who loved eating, all of a sudden was happy eating a lot less.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, and now I want to know. So I'm
So
thinking
you'll do
I think
your
I
next
really.
book.
I don't know about book, but I feel like I want to do that study.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm really
start at
curious.
age 60, 70, and 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it just came from this. The President's Council on Physical Fitness just did a conference on campus looking at physical fitness across the lifespan, trying to fill in all that missing research area, looking at exercise in older people. I mean, there's some research there. Like, there's plenty of research there, but not nearly as much as there needs to be. So, yeah, I've been really kind of thinking about this issue and what is needed. And
Yeah, that's more my concern is every decade I go up 5 pounds, and eventually that's a lot of weight.
right, that can add up over time. Yeah. So that's what, hopefully,
Yeah.
popping back into your sort of leanest livable weight should fight that off. Prevent those 5. Yes. Hello.
I have doctors who say, if you fill up on fiber, healthy protein, healthy fats, you're not going to be hungry as much or for the wrong stuff.
Yeah. Certain foods definitely are more filling. So those low carb diets, where you end up eating a lot of protein and such, those have been really effective in that early weight loss stage because they really make people full. And so it's easier for them to eat less. Now it doesn't matter, in the long run it comes back anyway. But I should say I am not in any way opposed to eating healthy food. I'm highly in favor of eating healthy food, promoting vegetable eating, promoting a range, promoting, you know, a really varied diet, including all those things that we know are healthy. So I guess what I say in general is healthy stuff makes you healthy, but it doesn't necessarily make you thin. But it's, you know, we need to focus on the healthiness and not worry about the thinness. Thinness is a goal imposed on us that we should just get over because it's not necessary.
Did you end up helping your mom?
No, no, alas, she died before I ever got a book deal, and yeah, she would have disagreed with everything I say in here, but she would have been delighted to see a book at all. Yeah, so I, yes.
The fact that childhood obesity is increasing, I assume that's a fact.
Yeah.
Doesn't that suggest that somehow the set point can get adjusted?
Yeah, this is something that set point theorists have grappled with. It's not just childhood obesity increasing, it's obesity overall, all ages, not just in the US, but all over the world. And the way we think about it is that it's not that a small percent of people are getting much heavier. It's that everybody is getting a little heavier, which is consistent with the set point kind of theory. With that said, there's a huge amount of changes that have happened in the last 40 years, all of which would make people more likely to gain weight. And they're all happening together. So it's not so surprising that we're seeing this sort of set point creep, unfortunately. I mean, so many things. Just to pick my pet one at the moment, is portion size is insane. It is crazy, the changes. An example, the cookbook. So think of The Joy of Cooking. There's like been 40 editions of it or something. If you look at the current one and compare it to the earliest one, the recipe for chocolate chip cookies, for example, is identical. Except in the current one, that exact amount of ingredients is described as making a dozen cookies, and in the old one, it's described as making 3 dozen cookies. Right? So there's a huge change. You see this in everything. The size of ice cream scoopers that are manufactured are larger than they used to be. The size of muffin tins that they make are larger than they used to be. You know, the original Coke bottle, the classic design that you can all envision in your head is 6 ounces. And now what do you get? You know, you're thirsty 32. People are walking around 64-ounce like tankers of so what? How did car holders, cup holders in cars are bigger than they used to be. I mean, every single, like wherever you look, you can see evidence of portion size. It's not just getting a little bigger, but getting insanely bigger. And that's just one thing. Corn is another big issue in terms of weight gain. The corn lobby, the fact that there's corn syrup in literally everything, all these things are playing in. And all the things you always hear about, being sedentary and fast food, blah, blah, blah.
Have you looked at all about how stress and having high cortisol will impact metabolism?
Oh, a lot about metabolism. We've done a bunch of research on stress and what stress does to dieters, and stress messes up a diet. Stress makes it more likely that weight will return. And we actually also did studies where we showed that dieting itself, restricting eating, causes a cortisol response, causes a physiological stress response, which then cycles back to make the diet not work. So, so stress is to be avoided, as everyone says, but it also matters a lot in this area. Stress is going to mess up your weight. Lack of sleep is going to mess up your weight. Avoiding stress is healthy. Sleeping enough is healthy. Eating healthy food is healthy. Exercising is healthy. All these things are good to do. They will not necessarily make you thin. Okay. Still good to do them. Yeah.
I have read recently that people are sleeping less, and so they're eating that extra meal at night.
Yes.
You know, you eat dinner at 6, 7, whatever, and then they get hungry about 11. So there's eating at 11, and that's causing an increase in weight.
Yeah, I completely believe that. In fact, I literally this morning talked to a Washington Post reporter who's writing an article on that exact thing, on this 4th meal thing. Yeah, it's true. And also, sorry, one last thing about sleep. And I think I do cover this in the book, and I'm gonna say it wrong now probably. But they've done studies showing that if like they bring you into a sleep lab and give you 2 nights of less sleep than you normally sleep, and then they see what you eat when they offer you breakfast, you eat more when you have less sleep. So getting sleep, good thing to get. Really good thing to get, yes.
I know you're advocating not eliminating any foods, but what is your opinion on this turnabout? For years, nutritionists and doctors say low fat, which of course then you have to eat more carbs. And now it's fat doesn't make you fat, and it's okay to eat fat and egg yolks and steak. It, again, not to pig out, but this complete turnaround.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I've been kind of glancing along, sort of following along in that debate. I'm not involved in that debate because I still think moderation is effective. I still think moderation is a perfectly healthy thing to do. But it is fascinating that everything they used to say was healthy is now considered unhealthy, and vice versa. And I feel like what that says is that, you know, you just, nobody knows anything. No one, it's still all unfolding, you know? We just don't really know. And that's why I keep pushing moderation. I firmly believe no food is poison, except poison itself is poison. But, you know what I mean? There's things you can put in your mouth that are poison, but food, no single food's gonna kill you if you eat it sometimes. So, eat the things.
I want to thank Traci while we still have people in the room. You're welcome to